guys, welcome back to my channel, The Inked Reader. Today we are in a bit of a different settings as my usual. Just the studio was overcrowded. I wanted to film this before going to work, so I'm actually filming this early. It's gloomy weather, so the light is what it is. But without further ado, I wanted to film this video because I've actually finished last month my last book in my Japanese horror TBR that I had started in 2021. So initially that TBR was made of 12 books. Unfortunately, one book is basically unavailable. Like I looked online, I looked at eBay, I looked on Amazon, Kindle, I just couldn't find it. So instead of 12 books, I ended up reading 11 books, which is totally fine. I am here to wrap up the challenge in the sense that I have already spoken about single books throughout my wrap-ups. However, I do like to wrap up these challenges and put them from my least liked to my most liked. This cut down is based entirely on enjoyment, but also when I was compiling that list yesterday, I also decided to move things a bit around regarding of what stayed with me the longest, because some of these books I've read now a year ago and some of them still stuck with me, so I might have given a bit of a higher rating to another one at the time. But some of those books I keep thinking about, while others I think about less. Last thing I want to premise is that I decided to do this challenge just because in my mind, I don't know, Japanese authors were particularly good at horror, and I think this idea came from me reading some horror mangas before and really enjoying them, and also from playing some Japanese video games that were absolutely terrifying. And I don't know why my thoughts process shifted from manga and video games and to actual books, and I thought, Japanese authors are gonna write the best horror ever. Spoiler alert, it was, to be fair, one of the challenges that I liked the least. A lot of the books I didn't end up very much loving, but also I did find that basically what it's considered what you find line as Japanese horror, which is marketed as Japanese horror, it's mostly thrillers. And I had struggled because most of these books were not actually horror. So take the horror with a pinch of salt. Some were definitely, but many weren't. And I'm gonna say if it was or if it wasn't while I go through them, so you'll know. But yeah, overall, not the most satisfactory read. Said that, I did find a couple of gems, which is always good. So at number 11, if you had watched my worst video of 2021, you would expect another one. But actually, when I was compiling this list, I decided to put a number 11 in the miso soup. It's a very short horror Japanese novel. I would consider this kind of horror. Yes, I would target this potentially in the horror section. And it's basically the story of these Japanese young men trying to make ends meet and by basically be a tour guide. And one day he meets this foreigner. He comes in and says, I want you to show me the red district of Tokyo. I don't remember one city, I think it was Tokyo. And then he says, yeah, sure, okay, you pay me, I'll take you around. And they start going around, and this young man, he starts to realize that there is something very, very off about this foreigner, middle-aged man. And I hated this. This is a very famous one, so I think it was one of the first one that came up when I looked for horror Japanese stories, and I really disliked the writing, probably. I thought it was very messy, the story, but I also didn't like the plot or the way perversion was depicted in this sense. I found it was disgusting, definitely. It was disturbing, definitely. But yeah, the way it was written didn't really work for me. I thought that these written in another way, and I don't know if it's a translation or whether it is, could have even been more disturbing, but also more well done and fascinating. And in the end, for me, this just ended up being literally a mess, which is a pity because I do love miso soup. It's one of the best comfort food ever for me. So that was a pity. I would personally not recommend these. However, it is very famous, so I guess there is an audience for it, and there is something that appeals to many. For me, it was a journey into a dark mind, but without the fascinating side of it. It was just messy and very much unclear on a lot of things. So yeah, not for me, sorry. And number 10, it's definitely Parasite Eve. And the only reason why I put Parasite Eve higher than In the Miso Soup is that Parasite Eve, although it was absolutely disgusting in the end, it's a book that should not have been written, in my opinion. It's still something that holds my attention, while in the Miso Soup I kept getting distracted. I just didn't care. The writing just lost me a lot. While in Parasite Eve, the writing kept me there. It was full of scientific terms that could get a bit tedious sometimes, but I was like, what am I reading? But I was actually actively reading. While in the Miso Soup, it felt like I was not even reading. I was just kind of reading without grasping or without retaining the story. So that's why I bumped it up one spot. But said that, this book is shit. It was horrible. So this is the service scientist, and he loses his wife in a car accident. She goes in a coma, and he decides to take out a piece of her liver, and from the liver he's planning basically to rebuild her, create another her. Don't ask me how he's thinking that's ever a good idea, but yeah, basically that's the gist of it. He takes a piece of a liver with the aim to create a clone or recreate his wife, basically, and things go very, very wrong. And this is just an absolute mess. It's body horror, I would say. A lot of body horror in these, a lot of trigger warnings in these. I think these graphically goes into scenes of rape, and that was something that I could have made without, especially toward the end. It was just absolutely a gross story. Said that, if you're looking for something extremely gross and you like scientific horror, scientific thrillers, this might be, it's so out there that it might be even enjoyable for somebody. For me, it was just morally wrong having all that's in this book in there. I cannot testify whatsoever about the scientific validity of anything that's in here. So if you're a scientist, if you read this, would be very curious to know if anything of a background science behind this was remotely truth to life or not. I doubt, but who am I? I'm not a scientist, so I'm not judging. It was just not good. Just the plot. I'm definitely not into horror, scientific horror. I found out, although I do like body horror. Scientific horror, not so much. I didn't like the plot, and I found these gross, not in a good sense, if it makes sense. I guess if it was gross but the plot was intriguing for me, I could have, it's something that I usually tend to like, but it was just gross with uninteresting plot for me, an absurd plot for me, so it didn't work out. Yeah, it was bad, but at least I read it. When the Miso Soup, okay, I don't care. Number 9, another very shitty book that actually was featured in my January wrap-up, was The Graveyard Apartment. This is, yes, another that I would categorize as horror, very mild horror. This is a story of this family that moves into a very large apartment, brand new apartment kind of. This block of flats that's very cheap considering how much room there is for them. However, the reason why it's cheap is because it's built on a graveyard. Fucking bad idea. Everybody knows, like, who builds stuff on graveyards? Like, who? Anyway, they move in. There are a lot of other people living in the block of flats at the beginning, and then creepy stuff starts to happen and everybody moves out until they are the only one left. Now with creepy stuff, you say, ooh, like this is kind of a haunted house but in a block of flats, and I found that this was so boring. Like literally, basically nothing happens, and also you don't get an end. Like yes, there is a creepy hunting element, but it's never explained. It never ends. And some people might like it. Like, I don't mind necessarily open ending, or where you can speculate and make your own thoughts on that, but at least give me something that then I can build my theory on. Here there was literally nothing, or close to nothing. Definitely not enough for me to just say, oh, maybe that's what happened or whatever. And I found such a pity, because there were some elements from the character's past that could be used, explored, and it weren't. They were just there for the sake of being there. It's overall very slow, which again, I might not mind it necessarily if there is a climax in the end and we get a big ending or an explosive ending or fascinating ending or whatever. I don't know, I can just mention 12 Nights in Rotter House to make an example of a very slow burning horror that packs a punch in the end. This was absolutely building to nothing whatsoever. It's not scary at all. Like the garage, I kept imagining a garage of my grandma when I was little. I was like, I can imagine how it could be that scary, but also no, like a haunted garage, just no. They come up with explanation from injuries that have no scientific base whatsoever, and everybody believes, oh yeah, that's what happened. I was like, what the fuck? Like no, people don't get cut in an underground garage without air by a gust of wind. Like, come on, people. I was like, no, it's no. In terms of horror, plain horror, meaning that there is no meat whatsoever to the story, there is no interesting part, this would probably go 11th place. The only reason why I didn't put this in 11th place is that because I read through it, like the writing was okay and I didn't mind it. I read from the beginning to the end. I could read it, like in the miso soup, again, as I said, I couldn't basically read it very much. I kept getting distracted. So that's the only reason. But in terms of how scary this was definitely last place. Number 8, we have Confessions. Now, Confession, people describe it as a horror. I would say that this is a thriller, to be fair. I don't see this as an horror, I'm sorry. This was going around a lot, and this is the story of this teacher. She gets to her last day of teaching classes, and she gets in the classroom and says, you know, my daughter that passed away a while ago, I actually don't think that was an accident. I think that one of you did it. So one of her pupils did it. And basically you follow different perspectives by going back in time and see the events playing out from different perspectives. And I hated it. I really didn't like it. I didn't find the background story to my taste, basically. It's something that I've read. It's a quick read. However, it took me ages for how quick this is. I really couldn't connect with the writing. And there is some elements of the bad guy that were slightly interesting, but not enough for me to kind of make this whole story believable. I was like, that's just a bit far-fetched, basically. And it's kind of far-fetched that just didn't work for me. Many loved this book. I didn't. It's definitely not my kind of style. Again, the writing though did play a part in this, and again, it could be totally translation, or it may be that just I didn't click with the author writing, which is fine. It was just not for me. And number 7, I have Goth, kind of a collection of short stories, but you follow the same protagonist solving crimes throughout the different stories. And again, I found that that's a format that really does not work for me. This is though by Otsuki, which is an author that I really enjoy in general. I've read other stuff by him and enjoy them. So I will keep checking out his stuff. I think just the format that he chose to make these wasn't working for me. And yes, again, you got these two guys, basically a boy and a girl, solving crimes. And again, this is definitely a thriller. I don't think this is horror. I don't think this was particularly scary. It was just meh. I didn't hate it. I do like his writing. And that, again, does play a part at the end of the day when you have to judge a book. However, the story was just meh. Big repetitive, like the format was more or less the same. Definitely a thriller, not a horror. It was just probably a 3 stars. It was just in the middle. But if you're looking for Japanese horror, I don't think this would fit in that category. Like, at least it's not the kind of horror I consider horror. Other people might have other parameters of what they consider horror or what they consider thriller. For me, this was definitely a thriller. Number 6, we have Real World. This is the story of basically this girl. She hears a commotion one day from her neighbors, and then she sees the young boy that lives there, so the only kid of this other family that lives next to them or in front of them, leaving the house in a hurry. And then she finds out soon later that the mother of this boy has been brutally killed, and she thinks that he did it. So she goes to her friends and just say, this is what I saw. I think this boy, who's very odd one, did it. And then somehow this bunch of girls decided to help him get away with it, basically. So this is the thing with this author. So she's gonna come up soon again. Her plots are intriguing. Like, I think she does something that's very fresh. However, the books are thrillers. They are not horror. It was definitely a thriller with some slightly, like, tiny bit of psychological elements, but I would not describe it as a psychological thriller at all. It's just a thriller with a bunch of unlikable characters doing questionable things with an ending that's just meh. However, her books are a bit farther up the list, although I ended up giving like 2.5 or 3 stars just because it's definitely a novelty. Like, it's something that I've not read before and not read since. This author, I don't know if I'm going to check out more by her. I might not. Let me know if you've read her and you have got some other recommendations to her books. But I think I would not exclude it. It's even if I don't end up very much liking the books in the end, the experience is still worth picking it up. If not this one, the next one, which I'm gonna just go right now, which is book number 5, which was Out. Out is the story of these, basically, a bunch of factory workers, and they're all women, and one of them, one day, she gets in a fight with her husband, and she kills him. And again, her and her friends, if you can call them friends, like acquaintances, people that she works with, this bunch of women have to sort the body out. And I'm just gonna leave it at that. And again, I was intrigued by this. It kept definitely my attention. And by the end, though, I was a bit like, I hated the ending. Like, I hated the ending. But at the same time, I hated the ending so much because at the end of the day, I did care a bit about these characters. It's not a book that I will ever pull my hair out. Just that's how much I dislike the ending. I was just, no. Like, I like this character. This is not what I wanted these characters to do. But that's a personal preference. Someone might read these and really enjoy the ending. For me, it was a bit, again, far-fetched. But this is a book that I guess it would be worth picking up and have an opinion on. If you have to choose between one, definitely go with Out rather than Real World. I think Real World, it's less well put together. However, I did prefer the ending of Real World rather than the ending of Out. So they kind of balance each other out, but Out's got it's more lengthy story and it's more explored rather than Real World. At number 4, we have one book that I actually do have in my hands, and this is Another. And there is also a manga that I'm definitely gonna check out. I heard amazing things about the manga, so it might actually be worth, instead of going through this novel, to read the manga. So that's my first suggestion, go with the manga. I've not read it, but I've heard great things. And this book was okay. I did enjoy it, but it was nothing special. I think it was like 3.5 stars. And this is the story of this boy. He has a chronic condition and he moves into his grandma's house and he starts this new school. And very soon finds out that he's actually being put in a cursed class. It's a class where there's always a count of more pupils. So instead of having like 30 pupils, they're always counted like 31. And the reason is because they believe that if I don't do that, someone is gonna get killed. And indeed, in that class, there is a record of a lot of pupils dying of mysterious circumstances. So they have now come to believe that the class is cursed, and he has to find out why and what's going on and why the curse, is it really cursed, and blah blah blah. So this was okay. I did enjoy finding out the mystery. I thought it was a bit lengthy for what it could have been, but I did like the writing and I was satisfied with the end. So it was just nice going along with this young man and find out what was going on. Said that, I don't remember exactly what's going on. So it's one that it was fun at the moment, it just didn't stick with me too much. Yet again, I'm very peculiar with the books I decide to keep and whatnot, and I decided to keep this. This is a more young adult, and I think again it's a very mild horror. It's more paranormal if you want than actual horror. Again, with small parameters, someone might read this and say this is definitely horror. For me, it was more young adult paranormal than horror. But overall, it was an okay experience. I keep it. I might pass this on to somebody else one day, and I will definitely check out the manga. Number 3, I've got The Crimson Labyrinth. Now, this is definitely out of my comfort zone. So this is a story of this man, and he's now unemployed, and one day he wakes up and he is on Mars, or what he believes is Mars, and he's with a bunch of other people that basically have been transported to this foreigner, their weird land, and they have to play a game to get out. Now, I've read this before Squid Game was a thing, but now that I am sitting down and thinking about this, I think that somehow the premise can resemble in some things Squid Game. You don't have the same games as Squid Games or the same environment, but it's kind of the same premise where, you know, this bunch of people are thrown in this land and they have to survive to win a prize, basically. I mean, it's like the Hunger Games, right? Like, you would describe the Hunger Games as a dystopian fantasy novel, and I think this might apply for this as well. Is it horrorish? This was brutal. This was brutal, and I enjoyed that. And I thought, oh god, this is not something that I don't like. Hunger Games style books. Red Battle Royale, Red Hunger Games is just not my thing. Reason being, because I exactly know what's gonna happen. If you give me a bunch of characters, they're gonna kill off each other until only one is left. And guess what? It's probably gonna be our protagonist. It doesn't appeal to me, that format of story. So going to this, I was like, I'm gonna hate this. But this was so gross at points, but I actually enjoyed it. And also, I think what I did like is that we don't know much. So we are finding out about the game while we go through, and the way there was like some bad guys in these that grossed me out in a good way. Like, this was disturbing in a way that was fascinating. So would I recommend these? Yes, to be fair. I would recommend these. I think writing also worked. It was very simplistic, it was nothing special, but it worked for the story that I was saying, and I'm gonna keep these. And I was surprised because it didn't sound like a premise that I could have. So that's probably why it's so high up in the list. It's one that sticks with me. I remember the end. I remember some scenes from these. And yeah, it's a recommended one. On number 2, we have one that actually, if you have seen my best reads of 2021, is featured in there. And this is Summer Fireworks and My Corpse. This, though, it's a number 2 here, and the number 1 is not featured in the video. And this is what I said when I sat down and decided what stuck with me the most and what instead I really enjoyed and enjoy even more, probably on a rating or like enjoyment in the moment, but stuck with me a tiny bit less. And I guess the only reason why these didn't stick in my mind as much as the first pick is just because it's short stories. So short stories are very much out of my comfort zone. I've said a million times, I don't like short stories. It's not something I enjoy reading. However, these are definitely horror short stories. And there is the last story in these that's so creepy, so well done. That's why this book was basically a 5 stars for me. The first story I didn't love that much. The second and third, loved it so much. I really enjoy his writing. I found that the way he's created this atmosphere that's definitely tense and disturbing, it works for me, and I will keep reading him. He's the same author that did Goth that I discussed before. I think he does mostly short stories, but to be fair, I don't mind. But if he writes like a novel, like he wrote the last like short stories in these, which is just 3 short stories, so are quite lengthy short novels, I will definitely check that out. I really enjoyed it. It scared me. The last story disturbed me. It was exactly what I was looking for while going this challenge, and it took me so much to get around to actually going through this list and find something that actually was what I was looking for. And yeah, this is a good one. If you like short stories and horror, you cannot miss this one. And number 1, it's a very popular, the movie is very popular. We got Ring. So this is actually a quartet, and this is the first book from which Ring, the movie, has been taken. I've never watched Ring. I don't watch horror. They really freak me out, and I don't know why, but I love books. They do freak me out, books as well, but I don't know, visually I get more scared to a point that I don't want to do that to myself, while reading I'm okay with doing that to myself, if it makes sense. So Ring, yes, you have a promise of this journalist. His niece passes away after she had spent a weekend away with a bunch of friends, and all the friends pass away at the same time in different areas of the city. And he starts investigating what's going on, and he goes back to the same place that they have traveled to understand what was going on, because this cannot be just a coincidence. On an enjoyment side, like entertaining, this was a bit higher up in the sense that there are some moments, especially toward the end, that this lost me a tiny bit. However, if I have to consider the whole of it, consider this the whole novel and these are short stories, I was very pleased by this, and I was intrigued enough to go and buy the second one almost immediately, which I rarely do. I want to know what happens next. And not only I was intrigued by the reason why this is happening, but also like the journey we go through with this journalist was, it kept me on the edge of my seat at moments, and I was very, very curious. The writing is okay. Again, it's not what I remember. What I remember is why this is happening and how we get to find out why this is happening. But yeah, definitely suggested. If you love the movie, I think this is different enough to warrant a read, but also like, you know, then you can continue on with the story because it's not just that one movie, it continues on. I will definitely continue on. Yeah, thank you guys for watching. Again, leave your horror recommendations down below. If you have any other Japanese horror that you've read and you would definitely suggest, please leave them down in the comments down below. I'm gonna put here, this is the book I couldn't find, I couldn't get my hands on at all, which is a pity because the reviews were stellar, so I might have ended up putting this in first place, or whether, I don't know, I felt like it's a pity, but I'll keep my eyes out, maybe in a charity shop one day, who knows in life what happens. But yes guys, thank you for sticking around, and I'll see you next time. Take care of yourself. Ciao!